Hello, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to a Local 100 Fightback Coalition YouTube live stream event. Just so people know, going forward, we're going to be broadcasting on YouTube because we have much more control over our content, and we're able to keep the videos up. Facebook, for example, is taking down our videos after 30 days, and there's no real reason to build a presence on Facebook if they're going to sabotage our ability to build our platform. So we'd like to welcome everybody. We have a lot of things to discuss. As you can tell, it's been a crazy time, and there's a lot of pressing working class struggles and political questions that need to be addressed. But the first thing I want to do before we get started is share my screen, and we're going to talk about a brand new struggle that just became relevant. As you can see on the screen here, Starbucks workers are on strike. It's a nationwide strike, and it's a strike for union recognition nationwide. No contract, no coffee. And we'd like to strongly encourage transit workers and all working class people to show labor solidarity and be on the picket lines with Starbucks workers, contribute to their strike fund, and show solidarity, show the solidarity that's necessary to make strikes like this win. There's no greater determination for the strength of the working class than victories and working class people being able to win and inflict their will through their own labor power and their own labor solidarity on bosses and billionaires like those who own Starbucks. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and go back to the coalition.
Also, we should say that the workers are asking for a boycott of Starbucks until they win recognition in their demands.
Yeah, I thought that was covered by no contract, no coffee, but okay. It's important that you.
That could be production, not consumption.
Yeah. So in any case, I want to try to get started. We have a lot of things that that, like I said, that have happened recently that we have to discuss. One of them is the Democratic Party's continued surrender in the face of authoritarian fascism and Donald Trump's assault on the past gains of the working class. Specifically, in this case, what was writ large was the Obamacare subsidies that allowed working class and poor people to be even able to buy health insurance of any kind. So I'm going to play a short video that talks about the longstanding practice of Democrats like Schumer and the role that they've played. It's about 5 minutes, but it'll frame the discussion a little bit for a wider discussion. So I'm going to share the screen. The video is by I Am Blakely, who's a YouTuber, and I just picked this one because I think it frames the discussion pretty well.
Over the last 10 years, as the feckless, spineless, loser, failure Democrats have sold out their constituencies time and time again. Oftentimes, you'll hear them making excuses such as, but Trump, we're not in the majority, but we don't have any leverage. And they make these excuses because Democrats love nothing more than surrendering. They love capitulating and being complicit with the Republicans. And for the last 10 years, Democratic and liberal voters have been accepting their fucking endless excuses. And I'm wondering, are you guys finally there yet? Like this question's for the norm libs. I mean, rank and file liberal Democratic voters, those of you who are usually the first to race up to the front right after the Democrats gave up their leverage and sold you out to go. What were they supposed to do? Are you guys there yet? Are you tired yet? Are you tired of being gaslit, thrown under the bus, fucked over, sold out? Also that this pterodactyl and his corrupt, incompetent fucking colleagues can look you in the face and lie to you and tell you to get over it and that they tried. So everybody knows these were the Democrats that voted to reopen the government and fuck you over. This is going to help the Republicans double your healthcare costs because you know what they got? You know what the Democrats got? Nothing. They got nothing. And you know what? Let me correct that. When I say they didn't get anything, I mean they didn't get anything for the American people. They didn't get anything for you. They did get something for themselves. I'll tell you at the end of the video why they voted to reopen it and what they got. Chuck Schumer did this on purpose. None of these people are up for re-election in 2026. They think you're dumb because this is the Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema playbook. They want to fuck you over on a certain policy or they want to sell you out on something. And so they find the lawmakers that are the least vulnerable in that moment. Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, when they knew they weren't going to run for re-election and people already hated them. Now these are the boogeyman of the day. But don't let the point escape you. This is on Chuck Schumer and their so-called leadership, because if it wasn't them, it would be a new group. It's a revolving door of sellout, corrupt, weak fucks. This is just this year's crop. Angus King is an independent. They know John Fetterman will never win re-election. Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, and the others aren't up for re-election until 2028. Long enough for you to forget. Do you see how this game is played? This motherfucker really put out that statement after he had already caved, going, I voted no, and I'm going to keep it. You voted no. Who gives a shit? You're the leader of the Senate. See, because these people think you're stupid and they have no respect for you, they think you're not going to notice that even though he's going, well, I voted no, so don't get mad at me. The reason why they even had that vote is because he allowed it. He is the Senate leader. He is the one that could have kept his caucus in line the same way that Mitch McConnell always kept his caucus in line. But did he? No, of course he did not. And do you think any of these people voted without his consent? Of course not. He then had the actual nerve to go on the Senate floor and go, no matter how this vote turns out, we're going to continue to fight. That was the fight. Democrats love to do this gaslighting thing where they talk about how they're going to keep fighting for you as they're surrendering. So as he is surrendering to the Republicans, as they are selling you out and throwing you under the bus, they'll look you straight in the face and go, we're going to keep fighting for you. No, literally. Here's Cortez Masto doing that same exact thing. This is where the fight really begins. It's just the beginning. No. That was the fight. The fight was happening just then, and you guys caved. But again, they gaslight you and go, oh, hi, guys, as we're caving, as we're selling you out, we're going to explain our selling out to you by telling you that we're still fighting for you as we already gave up the fight. This is a disaster. They caved, getting nothing. They got... Maybe we'll talk about it. All right, so now to the why, which I said I would explain. It is because Trump was threatening to get the Republicans to nuke the filibuster. The Republicans do not want to get rid of the filibuster. They don't want to get rid of it because they don't want popular policy that would actually help the American people to be able to pass. And it's for that reason that the Democrats also want to keep the filibuster. Remember, guys, the filibuster was the very convenient excuse that the Biden administration used time and time again to not fulfill campaign promises. We can't do voting rights for you guys like we promised, the filibuster. We can't give you a $15 minimum wage, the filibuster. We can't do anything about your health care, the filibuster. Taxing the rich, climate action, gun safety laws, sorry, the filibuster. Looks like the Republicans are going to get their way again. Republicans love the filibuster because it blocks any popular legislation from happening. And for the things that the Republicans like to do with government, they don't need it. Because think about the only things the Republicans care about doing. Right-wing judges and tax cuts for the rich and deregulation, all of which can be done through budget reconciliation and through the executive branch. So they love the filibuster because it serves as kind of a procedural cock block to doing anything for the American people. They've admitted as much. They're like, oh, we're going to get a DC statehood if we get rid of it. A base? That's why they don't want it. The Democrats, you would think, would ostensibly want to get rid of the filibuster because they supposedly want to pass a lot of bills to help the American people. And if you watch the election play out between Zohran Mamdani and the corporate establishment of the Democratic Party, you'll know the answer. It's because they're full of shit. They don't actually give a fuck about you. They don't actually give a fuck about passing any of the bills they promised they want to. So they finally decided that they were going to cave once Trump threatened to get rid of the filibuster because they have a vested interest in protecting the status quo just as much as the Republicans. They don't really care or want any of the things that would help you to pass, and neither do their donors. That is why they rush to sell you out, even when Democratic voters are telling them hold the line. And they did hold the line, just not for you, because that's not who they're looking out for.
Okay, so
Calling from a
okay, there we go. All right. So I thought that would give a framing of some of what the thinking was in the Democratic Party and why they sold out on this issue and why they always betray the interest of working class people because they don't want to deliver on these things. They just want your votes. So I just wanted to bring in other coalition members to open up the discussion about how this all came about. And the crisis we face as the working class fighting fascists that are armed to the teeth, both financially and physically, to win their aims and to torch democracy and to roll back all of our rights. And the precarious position that working class people find themselves in politically when this is what passes for an opposition party in this country. If they're an opposition party, they're a controlled opposition party, controlled by other billionaires, maybe not the same billionaires as Trump, but definitely controlled by billionaire interests. And so I just wanted to have a wider discussion about that. Who would like to speak first?
No, I'll go first.
Okay, Ray, go ahead.
Yeah, it does feel a lot like this is the end for Schumer, as definitely the minority leader, possibly even in the Senate, because the kindest interpretation of last week's events was he couldn't keep his fucking coalition together through another vote, and so they sold out, which tells you he's not fit to be the party leader. And I think honestly he really did was involved in these negotiations, because this is kind of his specialty. We get a symbolic vote after we lose and back down and lose our nerve, and then we hope we can get something in the future. It's like, why you got 1 year of funding for some for a couple of things. You got guaranteed pay for furloughed workers, which is already required under federal law. It's kind of like saying so you held out in part to win something that legally they have to give them anyway. So good fucking job for that. And I think when his term's up in 2028, I don't even know if he's actually going to run again. He may just have decided this will be the way out. You're probably going to see him get challenged for the party leadership in January, after the or in January 2027, because I know a lot of the candidates who are running now again, that he hasn't been supporting, like Plattner and and some of the other, they're not happy with him, and they've said they would not back him. And this feels like this is emblematic of his failed leadership. It's, I mean, yeah, McConnell's a piece of shit, and he's done a lot to destroy this country, but fuck, he was effective as a leader. He kept his party in lockstep. Schumer can't do that. And if you can't do that, why the hell are you in charge? If you can't get your people to stand in line and and fucking stand together for something, then what the fuck are you here for?
Yeah.
I mean, what's he gotten for us in New York? He got us a space shuttle at the Intrepid. That's the biggest thing he's ever gotten us. We had the Senate Majority Leader being from New York, and we couldn't even get him to give us hazard pay.
Yeah, well, he actually came and lied to us and said he was fighting his little fingers to the bone to get us hazard pay, and basically promised we would get it, and we never got it. So, but in terms of him not having control of the caucus, it's one or the other. I think he's the most incompetent leader in the history of American politics, and he can't hold anybody in line to vote, to hold the line on fucking Obamacare, healthcare. They can't hold the line on. If you can't hold the line on healthcare, what the fuck could you hold the line on?
Yeah.
Or we have to take seriously that Gene Shaheen said they were meeting with him every day. So of course he knew. Of course he knew what they were doing.
He had to, because otherwise 7 members or 8 members of his coalition, of his caucus, went behind his back, and he had no goddamn clue. And you don't get to be the Senate minority leader without having, by getting caught with your pants down like that. Yeah. He knew. He absolutely knew.
Yeah. Seth, did you want to get into the discussion here?
Yeah, sure. I think, I agree with everything that's said. I think, the Democrats certainly have done this time and time again. The blogger, whoever did that video was, alluded to it, that it's like Democrats love to surrender. That's what they do over and over. So then you just have to, if you're a thinking person, you just have to say, well, maybe it's not just coincidence. Maybe this is what the Democrats are supposed to do, right? And, as she alluded to, and we've alluded to, right, the Democrats aren't a party of the working class. Most of the people who vote for Democrats are working class people and poor people. But the party itself, if you study how decisions are made, how candidates are chosen, the flow of money, all of that stuff, how policies are decided on platform, it's all done by a select group of politicians in coordination with rich donors, which means billionaires, right? And so the Democrats they're different than the Republicans because they're both parties of the billionaires of the capitalist class, but one party is the Republicans are open about it, and they're the tip of the spear, and the Democrats are the stealth party that they have to convince working and poor people that they're our friends when they actually aren't. Now, it's important to note that in this age of Trump and MAGA, as such a hideous threat to working and poor people, we do think that it's important that when election time comes to try and keep people like Trump and MAGA out of office. And I think the last election shows this, that there is a significant difference now, but when the fact is that when it comes to actually fighting to make things better, working people and unions and poor people together standing up and fighting back and organizing is what really makes a difference. Striking, general strikes, strike waves, mass protests, and the Democrats are there to try and make sure that doesn't happen. So we put our faith in them, and they say they're going to help us, and then when the time comes, they stab us in the back, right? Well, they don't stab us in the back because they're not really on our side, but they trick us over and over. And so there's a game there, and at some point we just have to both rise up and start organizing and protesting, but at the same time, organizing politically, trying to say these people who did betray us, when there are people like Mamdani and other people who might be able to spark movements to try and get out the Schumers and so forth, get out the Dan Goldmans, get out the Hakeem Jeffries, right? The Hillary Clintons, all those people, get rid of them and try and replace them with people who are inspiring the movement that can actually raise our hopes enough that we can actually organize. But this is what I don't agree with her that it was just the filibuster. I mean, I think that was part of it, but at some point, right, the billionaires, and I think there's discussion of how the airline, the billionaires, the CEOs, the massive corporations, they all said to the Democrats, and the Democrats, that's who the party really listens to, right? They said, enough of this, right? You're going to damage our profits. You're going to damage the economy. And so they stopped.
It was also the Christmas shopping season, and all of that was also a big part of it. But I just wanted to get to one of the comments in the chat on YouTube. Oman Labor says, what do you think about Hochul saying she will not support free buses? Establishment Democrats will try to block Zohran's agenda. Schumer never endorsed Zohran. So, I mean, obviously, all this is true and correct. And, Kathy Hochul is a corporate Democrat. I mean, she takes money from banks. She takes money from real estate interests. She does not refuse to take corporate PAC money, and she is beholden to those interests. And they don't want to raise expectations that it's possible for working class people to put their thumb on the scale and force them to do things they don't want to do. And she wants to make it seem like it's impossible. It's not impossible. And I think Zohran's movement's going to show you that. And I think it's already being shown by the fact that Kathy Hochul came out just a couple of days ago being open to raising corporate taxes, which is something that is anathema to her whole political career and is something you would think she would run screaming from the room allergic to. But she's being forced to make concessions because she's running for governor for re-election. She has a progressive challenger. His name is Antonio Delgado, the lieutenant governor in New York State, who's running against her on a progressive platform. And that's putting a lot of pressure on her to make concessions. But, I don't think that anybody who knows Hochul and who she is politically, she basically is all of Cuomo's corruption without Cuomo. She is corruption incorporated. This is a woman that pushed through $1 billion of New York State tax revenue, working class tax dollars, to go to fund a playground for the rich owners of the bills, the pegulas, the billionaire owners of the bills, funding their state entirely through working class, overwhelmingly working class tax dollars. It's somebody who just agreed with Donald Trump to build a fracking gas pipeline in New York State as a concession to Trump, which is not only dangerous environmentally, but is also going to actually raise energy costs across the state. So, we know who these people are. And when we say to vote for Democrats to stop the worst outcome, to stop fascists, it's not because we have any illusions in them being actual defenders of the working class. There's a huge difference between the kind of Democrat that Zohran is, as a democratic socialist, and the kind of Democrat that Kathy Hochul is, or Andrew Cuomo is, or any of these other Democrats. I think that part of what the working class has to do is to get politically educated in terms of being class conscious, and in every circumstance, thinking about where do these ideas come from, where is the support behind Cuomo? And we've seen this during the election. The support behind Cuomo was the billionaire class. It was the parasites who make our lives misery. They were the ones that were behind Cuomo. And in fact, it was MAGA billionaires, people who were responsible for restoring Donald Trump to the White House. After he led an insurrection to overturn American democracy, they still supported him. And these are the people who supported the corporate Democrat wing of the Democratic Party. And so there's going to be a battle for the soul of the Democratic Party, because there's a built-in contradiction. You have a working class and poor base. You have a base that is overwhelmingly oppressed people racially, in terms of sexism, in terms of 1,001 dividing lines and the divide and conquer that happens under capitalism to keep the profits rolling in. And then you have a corporate Democrat power structure that has been expert at suppressing democracy within their own party, although they talk about democracy constantly. And it's part of the reason why Kamala Harris fell on her face in the course of an election, because she talked constantly about democracy. But if you're a working class person and democracy doesn't keep you from starving, democracy doesn't keep you from being forced from your home because parasites like Trump and Kushner are circling like vultures to destroy your communities, what does democracy really mean in real terms? Democracy is not a moral idea that we should all pledge loyalty to. Democracy has to be actual real control, and the working class having a way to implement their power in that system. And when they don't see it, they're not going to understand the urgency to fight for democracy, because it's abstract and it's not a concrete thing in their real life. And it's not something they think really exists. So I'm going to open up the discussion for anybody who wants to speak.
Ray, you want to say anything?
Yeah, sure. It's like you said, Schumer didn't support Mamdani even when he won the primary and was the actual party nominee, which should have been a fucking layup for him. Just even if he lost, you could just say, well, I went with my party's not candidate, as you should be doing. And
vote blue no matter who, wasn't that their slogan?
Yeah, instead he was afraid of Cuomo, which is stupid because you're the goddamn senior senator for the state. He would have been the mayor. You're way more powerful than he was. What is he going to do to you? It just goes to show how out of touch he is. I mean, even Jeffries, at least late in the campaign, so it was advantageous to support Mamdani and give him his support there. I don't think it swung any votes, but at least it said, he read the writing on the wall. He knew it, he understood the mood, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jeffrey's district went to Mamdani with what people describe as dictator numbers, the kind of numbers that Saddam Hussein wins in an election, the kind of numbers that Assad won in Syria.
Yeah.
But in Mamdani's case, it's real support, like real energetic majority, crushing majorities.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to pivot somewhat to Mamdani's victory and what it says about the Democratic Party establishment in the wake of some of the single most crushing victories they have ever had across the country. There wasn't a race across the country that Republicans won that they weren't supposed to win.
Yeah.
Anyway. And those who were supposed to be in tough races, who turned out to be
Chitterelli and Earl Sears both got their asses handed to them pretty handily. They both underperformed according to their polling.
And in Sears' case, Trump wouldn't even endorse. He just abandoned her. But you have the biggest night of success the Democratic Party has had in decades, and immediately within 5 days they waved a white flag of surrender and allowed Trump to get a victory after he had just gotten a massive defeat. And his poll numbers are in the toilet. Like he's in underwater in categories that were his.
He's underwater on literally every issue right now,
even
including immigration, which he fucking ran on. That was his bread and butter.
Yeah.
And people are like, when people realize, oh, you did mean everybody and not just the criminals like my brother-in-law, but I wanted to keep him.
Yeah, and also coming out now.
I mean, grandmas and working people, in factories.
Last week in Chicago, ICE kidnapped a fucking baby for several hours. They arrested. They grabbed up the parent. The kid was all alone in the back seat. They just drove off in the car with this fucking kid.
Yeah. Well,
they've shot American citizens, right? And they're doing the same thing that police have done, which is they say, "Oh, that person attacked me, so we shot them." It's like. It's terrifying.
But it's even worse. It's even worse than the impunity that police have in certain respects. Like they just assert authority that doesn't exist. Like they're just making it up. Like they're just
the crazy part is almost every time the judges have said we don't believe a goddamn word you're saying. It got to the point where the Bovino had to literally report to the judge every single day at 6
They
p.m.
kicked him out of Chicago too. They told him he could.
Well, and now he's in Charlotte, so I'm kind of worried my niece and nephew are going to get deported to a country they've never been to.
Yeah, that's Well, I mean, the problem is they just move them around, and also the problem is it's not a coordinated response nationally against this kind of ICE terrorism. But
I mean, there are people fighting back or standing up for basic rights and for the Constitution. These ICE agents are breaking the law, right? And we need to put pressure on democratic areas to arrest them, right? They're violating basic civil rights and they're violating state law. You can't assault or shoot an American citizen, for nothing. And that's what's happening over and over again.
Well, they've also tear gassed 1-year-olds. Like they
tear gassed a bunch of kids who were trick or treating.
And it's also coming out now that whole raid in Chicago, that nobody was guilty of anything, that they were like a lot of them were American citizens, and none of them were with Train Conductors at all. And this is not the first time. Like the Colorado apartment building that they raided a while back, that was before the election. There was nobody related to any gang activity that they arrested.
Yeah, the gangs are a cover for it.
Yeah, no,
the people they sent to, the CCOT, I mean, maybe something like almost over 80% had no criminal record.
Yeah.
Most of them were just law-abiding people who were like, I want to live in this country. I'm willing to work because it's hell for me back home. And it said you deported them to a torture chamber.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is that with Trump, there's no pretense anymore. It's just naked, basically corrupt use of the federal government to aid slum lords.
Well, let's be real. It's really Stephen Miller. Oh, he has a fucking blank check on immigration. there's a lot of questions about just how together Trump is, and if Stephen Miller's like puppeteering him, like he doesn't give a shit as long as he gets what he wants, which is an all-white Aryan nation for the just evil motherfucker.
But if you think about it, like he is a profoundly evil, depraved human being, and he's a disgusting racist predator and a very insecure, white supremacist shithead.
Mhm.
But like if you think about it, the strategy of the Republicans who led to the rise of Trump has always been, we just need a warm body to sign the bills. Like that's all the use of the president is. They need somebody in there that will not even think twice about signing into law their wish list.
And if you want somebody who's not going to think twice, Donald Trump's your man.
Oh yeah,
he barely thinks once.
Yeah, that's all.
Not to say he doesn't agree with the stuff. I think he does, but still, he's like, it's pretty clear now that he's severely degraded mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was
and
never
that
that
shouldn't
great
be a surprise to anybody. He was the oldest inaugurated president ever. He's a 79-year-old man who refuses to exercise and has long lived on overdone steak and fast food. None of those things are good for your health. Also, he legitimately believes exercise will kill you faster because he subscribes to this crazy theory that your heart has a limited number of beats in it.
Oh, yeah.
The story that one of his
that.
friends told him he was training for a triathlon or a marathon, and he said, "Why? You'll die sooner."
We do have to say that we hope he's right in his case. But in any case, we also have to talk about the elephant in the room with Epstein and the 20.
Oh, John, can I say something just back to the Democrats and Mamdani?
Oh, sure, yeah. Before we
just sort of wrap that up, I just want to say that, like, one of the things that motivates Fightback, sort of our central thing with respect to, the live streams we do, the actions we take, the political choices we make, is we believe that, right, the workers and oppressed people together, when we rise up, when we take labor action, when we protest in the streets, by the thousands, tens of thousands of millions, we win, right? And so that's why we supported Harris over Trump, because we knew that if Harris had won, we didn't think she was going to do anything for us, but that we would have a better environment in which to fight. And that's clearly true when people who are dissenting are being deported, right, or being beat up, are being targeted. Universities are being targeted. So we're confirmed on that we would be able to fight better and organize better if Trump had lost. We also, even though we see Democrats as a party of billionaires, we call for a vote for Democrats to hold off the worst attacks. But we recognize that if someone like Mamdani wins, the chance for a mass movement to, people are energized by him and they expect a lot. And to win those things that he has talked about, basic things, right? In Europe, they're like, those things are just are just very basic, right? They provide those things for their people. To win those things is going to. What?
I don't know if you've seen on Facebook, there was a list of countries that have universal health care and like all the things that Mamdani is talking about. And they won those things. Like if you look at Norway in the 30s, and the rest of the countries, it's like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. And the United States obviously is nowhere on that list. So, when the rich cry bloody murder about, free buses and free childcare and the basic kind of proposal that Mamdani is talking about, social democratic proposals, they want to make it seem like these things are like so outrageous and crazy and could never be feasible. Yet they're feasible across the entire industrialized world.
Absolutely. At this point, it's just ridiculous how far behind the rest of them we are. And I saw somebody today on Facebook trying to claim, "Oh, every single country with socialized healthcare is broke." No, they're not. It's like they
save money. They save money, and so would we.
It is cheaper to give people health care than to have them show up, later at the hospital because, with a much worse condition because they refused to go to the doctor because they couldn't afford it 3 months ago.
Yeah. Better healthcare outcomes on average for less money.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let me keep going, which is just that. So, right, that to win those things, we're going to need mass movements, right? And so we're going to have to organize that. And the unions are going to have to be involved, but we have union leaders. Look at our own union leaders. We have a union leader that wouldn't even endorse Mamdani, someone who's putting forth the most pro-worker agenda we've seen in America in a long time, to support, to say they're going to be neutral when someone like Cuomo, who's the author of Tier 6, right? That just shows how bankrupt and how anti-worker the leadership of Local 100 has become. And then the last thing that I just want to say is that with respect to this direction for, Democrats, are they going to support, are the centrist Democrats going to win, or are people like Mamdani going to win? And the question with that is the issue of, okay, so the centrist Democrats won, elections, governor of Virginia, governor of New Jersey. But the thing is, winning elections isn't, even though it's hard now, isn't even the hard part, right? The hard part is governing when people expect you to make their lives better. And what we saw with Biden after 4 years, right? He held off Trump for 4 years, but people were so demoralized and beaten down by the thing that him not actually helping people with respect to inflation and saying, oh, the economy is great, that in the end, people went back to Trump, right? And so what we have to do is recognize that Mamdani's platform and way forward actually provide not just winning an election, but holding on to power, because you're actually, if the movement actually can back him and push for the things that he is talking about, then people will actually see a benefit to their lives. And that will spread like wildfire around this country, because over and over, we have both parties screwing us over. And that's what the billionaires are really afraid of. They're afraid of a movement connected to a politician actually delivering, and people around the country saying, oh, wait, we can get free childcare, right? We can actually win, right? Decent health care and a rent freeze that actually makes our lives better when both parties have been fucking us for decades. And that's going to spread to Seattle, to Wisconsin, all over the country. And that's what Bill Ackman and Bloomberg, they know that they want to hold that off. That's why they supported Cuomo to the Hill.
Well, the other thing too is that, like, all of these racist scumbag billionaire bloodsuckers, they all think that we're going to be as brutal to them as they were to us. Like, they snitch on themselves every time Chris Matthews talks about, oh, we can't elect Bernie Sanders president because there'll be executions in Central Park of bankers and all this fucking shit. They're snitching on themselves, and their every accusation is a confession of how brutal they are to our class, and exactly what kind of revenge fantasies they constantly act out on people who they fear. They're telling you who they fear. They couldn't scream it any louder from the rooftops who their real enemy is. They don't see their real enemy as the Republicans. They see their real enemy as working class people getting it in their mind that they have power that can force these fuckers to kneel, can bend them to our will, can force them to make concessions, can re-instruct them that they are the fucking minority in society and that we are the vast majority, and that it's our will that makes the world work. It's our will that makes major American cities run, and that we can break them with that will. And we can make billionaires a thing of the past. We can make dump them in the scrap heap of history where they richly deserve to be. And their insane obsession with Zohran and with anybody who proposes these kind of rational, concrete proposals to actually make this city affordable, it really shows working class people. And that's why you see normie liberals beginning to realize, and this kind of scales are coming off their eyes, and they're kind of being exposed to a militancy that you would have never expected from normie Democrats. And that's why you see polls across the country where Zohran Mamdani is the single highest supported Democratic name across the country. And this is a person many of them didn't even know like a minute ago. And it shows you how dangerous these ideas are for not just the MAGA billionaires, and not just those who supported Cuomo, but for those who run the Democratic Party as well. And that we should take inspiration in that. Not that any one person is going to solve all of our problems or that we give Mamdani a pass on anything. Mamdani is unique in terms of elected officials who aren't even in power yet, who hold themselves accountable and puts themselves constantly in rooms to hear directly from those who helped elect him, and who holds himself accountable to those who actually funded his campaign. But we should never for a minute let him get comfortable in the position of power, to think he can wheel and deal and make concessions to the billionaire class, and that somehow he's going to come to some kind of agreement with them, or that they're ever going to not want to make him a failure. And we have to constantly build upon the movement that he created. And one good thing that Mamdani has already done is that he's created an ongoing organization of the people who built that movement to continue after he takes office, which is something that Obama didn't do. Obama, very straightforwardly dismantled the movement that he built to get him elected almost immediately upon being elected president. And that's a good sign. It's a good sign in the right direction, that he understands that he needs that movement, that he's not going to win any of the things he needs to win at the state legislature, like the funding for free and fast buses, for free childcare, or any of these. He's not going to be able to win any of these things without keeping that mass movement alive. But we, the working class, have to see it as our mission to have that movement grow the deepest connection to the most oppressed, to the most class powerful forces within the working class that can sustain it and supercharge that movement. And we have to have our voices heard in that movement. So I'm a little confused by people being so reticent to join that, to want to be in those rooms, to want to be in those discussions, to want to be engaged in united struggle with other workers, and constantly suspicious of Mamdani, who's not in power, but yet willing to forgive the crimes of those who've constantly betrayed us. So we need to be honest with our class that our consciousness has to change by being involved in these struggles. The fact that we are not involved in these struggles has a lot to do with the conservatism of the union, has a lot to do with the mistrust that we have of anybody who says that things could be different. The mistrust of socialism, the mistrust of anybody who is too radical. And we have to kind of educate ourselves that we wouldn't have a union if it wasn't for radicals. We wouldn't have a union if it wasn't for socialists. We wouldn't have a union that built gains that our union to this day pisses away if we weren't led by people who were unwilling to compromise, by people who were not willing to play the game by their rules, and were willing to actually unleash the forces of our class on the field of battle in strikes that shut down production. So, oftentimes we hear from transit workers, why do I care about Starbucks workers? If they make $30 an hour, isn't that going to make what I make less? And this is part of the narrow kind of like a Hunger Games, scarcity mentality that we've ingested from the billionaire class. It's why they want to control the media. It's why they want to control acts. It's why they want to control the educational system, because they want everything to reinforce the idea that we are nothing and they are everything. And if you act too radical, it could wind up boomeranging on one section of the working class, and they preach this divide and conquer. And we have to try to undo that. And part of what our coalition is trying to do is to try to ask questions that actually inform you to see yourself in your class, you to see that your consciousness has to come from your class position. What's in your interest? What's in your class interest? And that class interest doesn't stop at the shop gate. It doesn't stop at the city line. It doesn't stop at the national line. That these are international connections that unite us the world over. And that we're not going to win anything in isolation. So anyway, so sorry to go on a little bit, but I just wanted to try to sketch out why these political questions that can seem separate are actually tied together by 1,000 connections with our lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to open up the discussion for others who want to speak.
Yeah, I remember back in school card, there was, late 15 or late 20, 15, early 16. Yeah, they had the fight for 15 for fast food workers.
Yeah.
And one of my classmates, she was saying, well, I don't think that, they're worth that kind of money. It's like, and for the same reason that you said, like, oh, it diminishes the money I make. It's like, first of all, you do think it's worth that much money because you go to fucking McDonald's, and that is a multi-billion-dollar corporation that makes a shitload of profit. So that money is there. Secondly, I mean, it doesn't mean your labor is worth less because somebody doing ostensibly easier work is getting paid more now.
Yeah.
I mean, it reflect on the nature of the work you do. And if they're getting 15 to, as you put it, flip burgers, then what, instead of getting
more.
Yeah, why can't you get more? I mean,
Right.
Workers in other countries get paid, like in Europe, McDonald's has to pay them more because Europe has prevailing wages and higher standard of living and all that. Their food isn't horribly inexpensive. They didn't run and abandon those markets.
Yeah.
They didn't say, oh, well, now we have to pay them twice as much. I guess we'll just close all these restaurants. No, they stayed put and they make fucking money. It's like, and my favorite argument with these billionaires, we can't raise this, millionaires tax. They'll leave New York. First of all, no, they fucking won't. They love the cachet of being a New Yorker. They got this is the entertainment and cultural capital of the Western world.
Also financial capital.
They will not leave here. And Massachusetts a few years ago passed a millionaire's tax. They haven't left. Yeah, they're not leaving.
Not to mention,
where are they going to go?
About other high tax states like Jersey, California, Massachusetts.
They're not all going to go to Texas. I mean, you're going to get tired of having the same weather 8 fucking months a year. I mean, it's when the Yankees were looking for a new stadium, it's like they were threatening to leave. Nobody believed them because they're the fucking Yankees. You're not going to trade New York for Charlotte or Las Vegas. This is fucking New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not giving up on that.
The other thing, too, that really is hilarious to me is that American workers and American people in general, they have this idea that the rising tide lifts all boats, right? That it's good that corporations are successful because eventually it'll trickle down, right? For fucking 40 years, they sold this lie to American workers with Reagan's, trickle-down economics and all this bullshit and all of this stuff that we saw in real time wasn't true. But yet people still hold to these ideas that it's good that Elon Musk makes all this money because eventually that'll trickle down to me. But nobody ever puts that lens on working class living standards. That when one section of the working class wins, that all of our wages will go up. That if they win better working conditions, that we're much more likely to win better working conditions. And that if they are able to bring their billionaires to their knees, then we are much more likely to bring the billionaire-funded, Democratic Party politicians to their knees. And that's the dynamic that we need to be focusing on when we talk about power. Power doesn't come from them. Power comes from the bottom up, not the top down. The reason why the power comes from the top down in this situation is because our class has been demobilized and doesn't have any sense of its own power. It hasn't used it in so long. It has no cultural memory of what it looks like for working class people to kick ass and to force people who think that we're not worthy of even being in the same room with them, to force them to actually concede to us. They haven't seen it. They don't have any cultural memory of those struggles. And they've only seen defeat after defeat after defeat. So of course they believe in the power of the rich and powerful. But that doesn't mean that you don't have any power. In real terms, our power is as powerful, if not more powerful, than theirs. And you can hear it in their voices. They are fucking terrified. They are terrified that we will get it in our minds, that we fucking run this city, we run this country, and we run the world, and we can fucking make it all stop any fucking time we feel like it. Anytime we've had enough disrespect, We've had enough of being forced out of our own communities. We've had enough of not being able to live in the communities that we keep running. Hospital workers not being able to afford to live in the city. They died during COVID. Transit workers dying. 173 of our coworkers dead for no other reason than they had complete contempt for our lives. They kept the subway system running 24/7 because who gives a fuck, right? We got to make sure everybody thinks it's normal. And the fact that our lives could be sacrificed so easily, there's been no payback for that. They know that payback is coming. They know working class people are fucking angry and are in a rage and pissed. And they know there's going to be hell to pay for that. And they're trying to forestall ever having to pay the piper and pay the consequences for what they've done. And we need to take a lesson from that. You know, they don't get this out of control and just literally light money on fire. More money than Zohran would ever tax them. They have just lit on fire and paid to other billionaires in the media to buy ads. They don't do that for no reason. And we should take a lesson from that. So, you know, like we have to reorient ourselves to where our power comes from. And we have to pay attention to our enemies and how they want us to think and how we should actually think based on our own history and our own lessons. Seth, good. I wouldn't want to filibuster.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to point out is that, you know, capitalism spends a huge amount of effort in the educational system, in the media, in the government, trying to convince people. And it's not just like one slogan, it's decades, right? From, you know, people growing up, it's pushed in their heads every day that that our world is a meritocracy, our system is a meritocracy, that the people who are billionaires earn that money, right? And it's a lie. It's the exact same thing during feudalism, right? There were all these things that were put in place. The church, you know, from the family telling people that the king and the nobles were somehow inherently better. It was in their blood. It was divine right from God that they were above everybody else. And so now Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Peter Thiel and all those other blood-sucking scumbags, right? They all in our society, they're worshipped that somehow they got there, you know, based on their intelligence or their effort or all that stuff. And it's all a lie, right? The people who rise to the top are the psychopaths and the sociopaths who are, you know, they already started, like people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, they already started off in wealthy families, right? And what they all share in common is that they're sociopathic and willing to sacrifice any human being in order to keep rising up. They're the most vicious, the most dangerous, the most hurtful people in the world. And so they are the ones who are willing to crush everyone around them to go up. And that's really the only difference. And we should live in a world where billionaires do not exist, right? And it's that simple.
You know, the other thing though too is that just to pivot to the Epstein stuff, like it's a real instructive lesson of what happens when we allow billionaires to exist. That this whole cesspool of disgusting sexism and human trafficking and predator mentality is the obvious outcome of when you give someone everything they want all the time with no checks and balances and no guardrails at all. When you have the sheer level of unchecked privilege that the American ruling class has in terms of world historic terms, like it's beyond the level of the robber barons now. It's not even close in terms of the income inequality that we're facing is on levels that make the robber barons look like they were paupers. But just pivoting to the whole Epstein thing, there's a connection too in the fact that they haven't been able to get away with suppressing it. That even the Republican Party, whole sections of it are now signing the discharge petition. There's a rumor that up to 100 additional Republicans will eventually sign this discharge petition to release the Epstein files. Marjorie Taylor Greene has basically been excommunicated by Donald Trump, and they've got a ongoing, like, hilarious crash out about,
she's getting death threats now.
Yeah, she's getting death threats. So now she knows what it's like to be AOC or Jasmine Crockett or Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar, etc. And
she still supports Trump.
He's
trying to get her killed.
Yeah. She's still
she's running for president in 28, no doubt.
Yeah, I think
that's what she's setting the groundwork for.
Yeah, I think that's what she's setting the groundwork for. But in any case, like, I don't have any solidarity with fascist scum and white supremacist shitheads like Marjorie Taylor Greene. But it is kind of hilarious, the fractures that are happening, because the base of the Republican Party, even though it's not as working class as the Democratic Party, there are huge fissures there with the lies that they sold. They created this whole QAnon conspiracy theory, and Trump has trolled this, and so is Vance, and so is Elon Musk, and and Bannon, and all the rest of them, and who's the other one? Alex Jones. Like, they have mined this treasure trove of conspiracy animus, so much so that they've, like, had death threats at, like, a pizzeria that had absolutely nothing to do with anything that had to do with child molestation. They've mined this for decades, and now they're paying the piper with a lot of this, the stuff coming out. And I'm just going to put up on the screen about a resource that you guys can check about what's in the emails. Zeteo, which is run by Mehdi Hassan, who was a journalist from Britain, who's an American citizen, who was fired by MSNBC for his coverage of Palestine. They did a very exhaustive search of the emails that implicate Trump, Peter Thiel, Steve Bannon, Ehud Barak, Larry Summers, Bill Clinton, and others. Workers should definitely take a look at some of the revelations. Not so much for salaciousness, like, because I'll be honest with you, I don't want to even think for a second about Donald Trump blowing Bill Clinton. Okay, that's not exactly what I want.
Yeah, not an image anybody wants in their head.
Nobody wants to think about these things, but it's important that we not look away from these things, because it really, it sketches out, like, exactly how compromise and bribery is like the stock in trade of somebody like Epstein, who is very credibly rumored to be a Mossad, connected to Mossad, and to be, an agent of Israel, and how, the trading of favors, and how they talk about, the insane privilege they have, and knowing everybody's secrets, and everybody's in the club. George Cohen once had a famous line about this, saying that it's a big club and you're not part of it. Like when he's talking about the Democrats and the Republicans and political corruption, and how they're all bought and paid for by the billionaires and the bankers and all that. But it's important that we pay attention to how popular anger can even cement in a united front, Democrats like AOC and the left wing of the Democratic Party with sections of the Republican Party, because they're terrified of what will happen if they don't vote to release these files. And it's really amazing that you can have Trump go and get that moron Boebert, the congressman, and bring her into the fucking Situation Room. The Situation Room is where, like, they watch drone strikes, they watch military maneuvers. It's the highest security level of the government. They brought this fool in there, and they had her meet with Kash Patel and the NSA and the highest levels of the intelligence community to scare the living shit out of her, to get her to say that, no, we shouldn't release the files because you don't really know what's in there. Can you imagine what is in these files? If they're willing to go to that level to take some schmuck lower bench congresswoman and bring her in to scare the daylights out of her, and then it boomerangs on them because she's even more convinced that the files have to be released.
They picked the wrong one because she is a true believer in that shit. She's an absolute conspiracy nut, yeah.
Now having seen what she's seen. So it's crumbling before their eyes. And they're not going to be able to keep, and all the king's horses and all the king's men ain't going to be able to keep put Humpty back together again once these files are released. And working class people should want to see that. We should want to see it all collapse, and we should want to see Bill Clinton go to jail. We should want to see all of it.
If he did anything, let him go to fucking jail. I love how they think that Bill Clinton is our version of Donald Trump. Like, he was president 25 years ago. When it's like he's not even. I mean, we don't give a shit about Bill Clinton anymore. I mean, yeah. He was charming then, but that was the 90s.
Seth, did you want to comment on the
stuff?
I mean, it's a disgusting topic to have to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that, right, it connects up to what I was saying, that, right, under capitalist society, the people who rise to the top are the most repugnant, sociopathic people who want to exploit other human beings. And it ends up that the people like that, not everyone, but a high percentage, right, are abusers, people who have, twisted things when it comes to, abusing children, things like that. I'm not everyone, all those things, but, certainly there were accusations with Elon Musk with respect to sexual harassment, right? There was the thing with the stewardess and the horse and stuff like that, right?
I'm just
pointing out what
but there was no horse involved. The horse was part of the bribe.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean the. Yeah. Sorry, yes, the horse was.
It
was just the headline. It was not right. That not
there
involved.
There are rumors about that too. There's rumors that there's a horse named Bubba.
Okay, but in any case, working class people should want to see. What we know for certain is that Epstein was connected to a huge number of the most powerful and richest people all around the world, from Prince Andrew, right, to Dershowitz, to Elon Musk, to Peter Thiel, to Trump, to Clinton, right? And it's very likely that all those people were involved in exploiting women, right, exploiting girls, because that's what people who rise up to that position. They are people who are sociopathic and who don't care about other human beings, and that's how they get off. And so we should all want to see, and we should want to see everyone involved in there go down, right? I would love to see that. And it's interesting that there's just a quick aside is that there was a leftist. He was a socialist who wrote fiction. His name was Stieg Larsson, and he wrote the trilogy like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And he really, if you read that or watch the movie, right, it goes into the sick mentality of the rich and the powerful, and how it connects up to seeing that you can just brutally exploit other human beings sexually through violence and all that sort of thing. I just think that's an interesting thing. The other thing is, so now let's go back and be more specific. It's very interesting to see how MAGA and this whole fascist movement has developed around QAnon, right? And you have QAnon, which is basically riling people up to fascism with in some ways the very genuine thing of wanting to save kids from sexual exploitation, right? But it's all built around a massive, right, a leader who's going to come in and bring in this fascist movement and save the children, and it's Trump, right? And Trump's a rapist and almost certainly a pedophile, right? And so it's the idea that the hero of this to save children from pedophilia is himself almost certainly a pedophile and a known rapist is insane, right? But that's how fascism is not logical, right? And so it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. But in the end, for people like Stephen Miller, for people like Steve Bannon, for people like Alex Jones, right? In the end, it's not really about saving children. It's about the fascism, right? It's about using that to go and attack people, because you say you're saving children, so let's just kill all these people who are exploiting children, right? That's what they say. Now, it turns out that Trump, right, and a lot of church leaders, right, and a lot of people in MAGA turn out to be the people who are really right pedophiles and hurting children, right? If you want to know who's right, that's what the statistics show and what we see in news stories over and over again. You can look up the Southern Baptists, right? You can look at the history in fundamentalist Mormonism, things of that nature, in the Catholic Church, right? That's not a coincidence that all these centers of Orthodox, right? It's also very prevalent in the Hasidic, in the very ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities as well, right? It's not a coincidence, because when you, right, those communities exist with men at the top to shut down women, right, and to exert authority. And when they do that, the people at the top have the ability to oppress people and abuse people, and it happens over and over again. So,
Yeah.
right. So in the end, but I think I just want to say it because it's really important to just distill out how much. So MAGA is now basically a pro-pedophilia movement, right? And no one expressed that better than Megyn Kelly, right, in that video that everyone should watch, right, where she basically says, "Oh, we're not talking about 5-year-olds or 8-year-olds. We're talking about 14 or 15-year-olds who are children, right, and who are being raped by powerful men, most likely like Donald Trump, right, and people like that, and Epstein." And she goes on to basically defend pedophilia. And I just want to tell everyone who's MAGA out there, that's what your movement is. You are pro-pedophilia, okay? We've seen it there, and everyone is, either people are just not talking about what came out in the Epstein thing, or they're minimizing it, or they're justifying it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's because in the end, it's about the fascism, right? And if Trump, right, goes into, right, talks about his daughter being a hot piece of ass, and he goes into, he's found, right, liable for rape in a legal court, if he's known to have gone into all the dressing rooms for teenagers during the beauty pageants and so forth, right? We know what he is. He's almost certainly a pedophile. He's a rapist, right? And that's what MAGA now supports.
Don't forget, Megyn Kelly's also a lawyer. You think of all people, she would know the fucking difference. 15's too young, period. No, Megyn Kelly's an attorney.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing,
for an
right?
attorney to make that, and to throw away whatever legal credibility they would have as from that, to say, oh no, I mean, it's almost okay if she's 50. It's like almost okay doesn't count in court. 15's 15, period.
She also said barely legal. Barely legal.
Well, she was quoting someone. She was quoting someone else who said that, but who the fuck calls 15 barely legal? Like, I don't think there's a state in this country where a 15-year-old would be considered barely legal for anyone over the age of 18.
Jeffrey Epstein would.
Yeah.
Well, he's dead, so he can't.
Yeah. So. Well, I mean, the other thing though too is like a lot of these people are grifters and they're along for the ride. And it's about, I mean, Megyn Kelly has experienced a huge growth in her channel because she's coddling the right. And when she's not excusing Epstein's crimes because she gives a shit about Epstein. Why would she care about Epstein? Epstein's dead. Yeah. She's preemptively seeding the ground for when it does come out that Trump raped young teenage.
I've seen people say, "Oh, Virginia Giuffre said he never had sex with her." That she was one of these girls. There were dozens of them. Unless they all say no, we never like. And even if he didn't have sex with any of these girls, Epstein was clearly very concerned that Donald Trump would say something, and you can't say something about shit you don't know about.
Well,
so
not only that,
the best case scenario for Donald Trump is he kept his mouth shut about his friend Jeffrey having trafficking in teenage girls, which is still probably enough to make you a co-conspirator.
Yeah. Well, the other thing though too is that you got to understand, as a victim of child sex trafficking, if the person who is the president of the United States, one of the most powerful people on planet Earth, is the president when Jeffrey Epstein gets killed and the videotapes don't work, would that somehow come into your calculation over whether you want to make accusations about him being involved? So of course she said he wasn't involved in anything.
And of course, Matt. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, let's stick to stuff that's really concrete. What we know for certain, right, is that Trump sent, right, what was it, Todd LaBlanche to interview
Todd Blanche, yeah,
right, to interview Maxwell, right, and she ends up at a minimum security prison with all these benefits. She's Epstein's assistant. and a convicted sex trafficker of these women, right?
Yeah.
And Trump is giving her all these privileges. So we know that for us, absolute fact. So we know that, we don't know exactly why he's doing that, but it's pretty clear that he wants it. He's trying to keep her quiet. He's trying to, he's even he won't deny that he will give her a pardon, right? Mm-hmm. He's trying to make a deal with her.
He's saying, oh, I haven't heard that name in a long time. No, this isn't somebody you knew in fucking high school. This is a woman who's been in the news a lot in the last 10 years. You've heard that name before, probably in your office.
Right. So once again, let's talk to MAGA, right? MAGA, just, President Trump has moved Maxwell, who is Epstein's right-hand woman, to a minimum security prison and has given her extra benefits that no one gets, right? Mm-hmm. So he is coddling a convicted sex trafficker who most possibly has information about him, right? And legally, that's what you are supporting.
Be in that prison. Bureau of Prisons regulations do not allow for people convicted of sex crimes to be in a minimum security facility because she is a risk.
Right. Well, the other thing is that she has a dog, first of all. She has a dog in prison.
In prison, yeah.
She has a club.
One of the prisoners is training service dogs, and she was allowed to play with it and pet it, and the other prisoners aren't allowed to touch it at all.
No, she has a dog. It's her dog, and aside from which, she it's so bad in terms of the privileges that she's getting that the prison guards are saying they're tired of being her bitch, and that's why they leaked this stuff. The situation.
Supposedly, the warden is helping her file for her clemency because he's tired of having to deal with her.
But the other thing is that it's very likely that Trump doesn't do things for no reason. Okay.
Yeah.
He doesn't give these kind of privileges for no reason. The birthday card, it's very likely that Ghislaine Maxwell leaked that because she is one of the few people who would have had access to that. And
the House had that though. Didn't that was the
gave it to the House.
Of course she did.
Yeah, she did.
But we don't know where. Yeah. But
there are things we can prove. There are things we can't prove. But I know for damn sure Donald Trump don't do that for nobody, for nothing. I mean, he's
absolutely every relationship he's ever had has been purely transactional.
Yeah, exactly.
And that even goes for family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to just point out quickly. I think we should move on. But I should also want to point out quickly that I think the guards who leaked that, right, didn't they get targeted by Trump's DOJ?
Probably.
I think they were fired or something, right, for exposing that.
They're not on her detail anymore. I know that much. But so let's try to move on because there's other things that we wanted to talk about. Seth, you wanted to talk about Gaza a little bit, so I'm going to play a short video from Democracy Now! About some of the conditions that Palestinians are facing. It's only like 2 minutes, and then we'll go on to somewhat of a discussion of that. Let me share a screen. Full screen.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Israel launched major airstrikes on Gaza beginning Tuesday night, killing at least 104 people, including at least 35 children, about a third of the dead, in the most lethal attack since a U.S.-brokered ceasefire began on October 10th. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered what he called powerful strikes, unquote, on Gaza, after Israeli officials accused Hamas of killing an Israeli soldier in Rafah. Hamas denied involvement in the soldier's death. President Trump defended Israel's attacks while also saying nothing's going to jeopardize the ceasefire. One victim of the Israeli attacks was the Palestinian journalist Mohammed al-Munirwawa, who was killed when Israel struck the tent where he and his wife were sheltering. By one count, Israel's killed over 250 journalists in Gaza since October 7, 2023. In Gaza City, residents describe being pulled out of the rubble after Israel struck their home.
We were reading the news about Netanyahu's threats and the attacks on Gaza, and then the attack happened right at our house. The roof fell on us. Our neighbors came and pulled us from under the rubble. Me, my wife, my daughters, my sons, and my wife's father.
We're joined now by Mohammed Shahada, writer
I'm
and
going to
analyst.
pause it here and stop sharing. Okay, let me just get us back where we were. Okay. So Seth, you want to like kind of sketch out a discussion about the struggle of the Palestinian masses against this kind of imperialist barbarism on behalf of Trump and the Democrats, and the bipartisan consensus that says that Palestinian people have no human rights.
Yeah. Try and just give, I'll give some facts just to set up, where we are now. Obviously, we're in a ceasefire, and I want to talk about that first. It's like, why did Trump push for a ceasefire? Why did Israel agree to a ceasefire? I mean, Hamas agreed to a ceasefire because Israel is committing genocide, right? And, killing, I think it's like, probably more than 70,000 people right now. And so, Gaza is desperate. But Israel and Trump wanted a ceasefire because they wanted Gaza out of the news. The genocide was so obvious, and Israel was hemorrhaging support around the world, in the West, particularly with a number of countries such as France even endorsing Palestinian statehood, that public support around the world for Israel was tanking. And so they wanted to just remove it from the conversation. Particularly, you can even look at Western Jews and American Jews, particularly young people. Support for Israel has rapidly diminished. But it's not really a ceasefire, right? Trump's plan gives Israel almost everything at once. They're still occupying a lot of Gaza. Hamas has to disarm, and Gaza is supposed to de-radicalize. And Trump's threat was pretty clear: accept this, or we're going to let Israel carry out its final solution. And so, Israel is committing genocide. Why not call for Israel to be disarmed? Israel is a fascist nation now where people protest in order to support torture. Why aren't we calling for de-radicalizing Israel? It's probably the most radical country in the world right now with respect to fascism. 60-70% of Israelis openly support mass deportations, which is really, genocide. Israel is by far the bigger terrorist. You can just look at the numbers. And it's not just Netanyahu. As I said, it's there's mass support for the brutality. But even with that, the far right isn't satisfied. Itamar Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, the two most radical ministers in Benjamin Netanyahu's government, they want to just continue the genocide right away. And they've also made it clear that they're against the Palestinian state. Netanyahu has as well. And they're working right now illegally to build new settlements to cut the West Bank apart so that it could never be. And any settlement they build, let's be clear, is a violation of international law and has been ever. You can't build in a territory that you've occupied through force. That's just a basic law that all countries agree to, and Israel just continues to do it. As was said there, so Israel can basically break the ceasefire whenever it wants. It's still mass killing. It killed 104 people, including children. They're limiting the food that's come in. They haven't followed what they've said with that. And there's just a news story now that said they won't even let U.S. doctors come in anymore because they're telling their stories about how brutal the genocide has been towards the Palestinian population, towards children, and they just don't want that information to get out. So Israel blamed the genocide on Hamas and the Palestinians, saying, "Oh, well, we'll release the hostages and the killing will end." We just saw there that was a lie, right? The killing is continuing, right? And we knew that beforehand, though. Israel has mass murdered Palestinians way before October 7th, and they will continue to do so. And they're mass murdering in the West Bank too, which was never a Hamas stronghold. So we know that those were just excuses to get the hostages back. So now they're just going to do whatever they want, continue to occupy illegally, right? And the last thing I want to do, and I urge everyone to look up this story because it's very indicative about Israel as a nation. not just the government, but Israel as a nation, there's been a long scandal about torture, right? Israel tortures Palestinians regularly, not Hamas militants, but just people they take in. They torture them. Sexually, they torture them, right? It's been documented at one military facility. So in order to keep international investigators out, Israel said they were going to do an investigation, and they took in the people who were doing the torture, and Israeli citizens and politicians stormed into the prison to protect the torturers and to protest, saying that the torturers were heroes, right? And this is the final thing. I urge everyone to look it up because it's in the mainstream news. The top military lawyer, the JAG, right, effective, of the Israeli military became a whistleblower because the investigations weren't going anywhere into the torturer. And so she released stuff basically to be like, hey, I want to hold these torturers accountable. And so I want to release stuff. And there became a big scandal about that, not about the torture, about her, right? That she was a traitor, and that she became basically public enemy number one in Israel because she actually wanted the torturers to be held accountable. And as a person high up in the military legal framework who saw that nothing was happening, she pushed to release stuff so something would happen. And they didn't care about the torturers, they're heroes, but they wanted to condemn her. So that's what Israeli society is right now. It's a genocidal, pro-torture society, right? And now we have this quote unquote ceasefire to try and get it out of the news, right? But we have to continue to talk about it because as we saw, right, children are still being killed. Israel is still mass bombing. They never respect a ceasefire, right? And so we need to keep the Palestinian people, right, and the fight for a Palestinian state in present and talk about it.
Yeah. I think also, one thing that wasn't mentioned that I think is important is that the revelations of the kind of torture that's going on, and also the depravity of the genocide continuing long after the supposed peace plan was negotiated, and the fact that it wasn't even a thought whether Palestinian people would have any say at all in the negotiations, how that puts a target on the backs of Jews globally. That it actually is gasoline on the fire for real anti-Semitism, and that it has a very dangerous boomerang effect. Here you have Cuomo and the rest of these fucking charlatans and liars and just blood-sucking scumbags who'll do anything to stay in power, using anti-Semitism as a bat to beat Zohran Mamdani with, and using racial epithets, and their whole bag of tricks to scare people that anti-Semitism is coming from the pro-Palestine forces, from those who are standing for Palestinian human rights, when in actuality, they and every Zionist force in the world and every pro-US imperialist force in the world is actually targeting Jews and putting a huge target on their back because people will be angry and justifiably angry about what's happening and be sent down a rabbit hole of anti-Semitism that will have huge, massive global consequences and be used by the very same fascists as a weapon, of a divide and conquer war of all against all, to justify authoritarian rule throughout the world. And it's always the Jews that will be targeted. It's not just something they dabble in. Fascism lives and breathes on anti-Semitism and will use it to the maximum extent. And that is why people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are never on our side. We are never clueless to what their motivations are. The Tucker Carlsons of the world and the Candace Owens and the rest of them, we know what they're about when they're trying to whip up a war on the right over support for Israel. They don't want to support Israel because they're anti-Semites. They don't want to support Israel because they want to actually use anti-Semitism as, a weapon to divide and conquer. And so when Seth as a Jew, as somebody who was raised culturally Jewish, doesn't take any joy in talking about a state that was created supposedly to shield Jews from the Holocaust being used as a fascist tool in the arsenal of U.S. imperialism to destroy self-determination of another oppressed people. That's the last thing that we take any pleasure in. But we have to live in the real world, and we have to face the facts of what a society is determined by what it does. Whose interest does it pursue? What is it being used to do? It's not just representative of Jews simply because it's run by Jews. That's just it's just not a fantasy. It's just not a reality. It's fantasy. I have somebody in the chat, Deep State Yuri. I'm sure that's a pun or and tongue-in-cheek name. He says, did you guys see Samuelson or Chirel say anything about Gaza? I haven't. And Ray, have you seen anything from our union about any kind of support for Palestinian human rights?
I don't believe so. I think
No.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that they've said in particular. I'm sure whatever they did was probably just generic, implicitly blaming Palestinians, essentially taking the side of the Israelis and saying, "Oh well, we hope it ends soon." And throwing their support to one side when, I don't imagine they took a progressive stance on it.
They won't even stand up to defend Local 100 retirees, right? Who Davis and Chiarello sold out with Medicare Advantage. You think they're going to talk about people across the ocean?
Well, not to mention they endorsed Nicole Malliotakis, an outright fucking fascist, who is MAGA to the core. They endorsed her in Staten Island for a congressional seat.
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't get any clearer than that. There are a lot of closet Trumpsters in our union that are not so undercover, aka John Chiarello, Tony Utano, and the rest of these bastards. And it's no surprise they think about us the way they do when they have these sympathies for MAGA. And the fact that they're so silent about it says everything. They put out a flyer. There was a protest against Trump and against ICE. They didn't even mention Trump, not once. It couldn't get any clearer than that they have a lot to hide. We're actually about to talk about the union leadership in a minute when we talk about Hochul. But we have to begin to try to wrap up.
Let me just say, I don't want to continue the conversation right now. I do think that based on what you brought up, it's worth we should talk some about anti-Semitism, the real anti-Semitism of people like Trump and MAGA, right? And how they're using anti-Semitism as a weapon to go after the left when there is some, but there's very little anti-Semitism. The fact that Mamdani is a perfect test case for that. Mamdani is anti-Israel, and he's very eloquent and moral about how he talked about it. And very similar to my position, which is that Israel is both an apartheid state and it's a religious state, right? I'm against religious states, whether it's Iran, Saudi Arabia, right? Or what MAGA and Trump want to bring to the United States with a Christian theocracy. I'm against that, right? And I'm against a Jewish state because it's an apartheid state because Jews are privileged in that state, and that's wrong, right? It's not a democracy when one group is privileged. And he spoke very well on that. That's not anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is when you hate Jewish people, right? Israel is a state. And I don't want it to be a Jewish state because I don't want any religious states. And that's fine, right? But we need to talk about, because it's anti-Semitism, the right and Trump are using it. They're lying and saying that the left is anti-Semitic. They're going after universities. There's not a lot of anti-Semitism on universities. There's a lot of anti-Zionism and a lot of anti-Israel sentiment, which is fine because Israel's committing a genocide, right?
Yeah.
So we should talk about it that at some point.
Yeah, no, we should definitely have a wider discussion about it. I just wanted to put up on the screen about a short video about the bill in the state legislature that has already been passed with overwhelming majorities to mandate two-person train operation on every train in customer service. And the fight over it being in limbo because of Kathy Hochul's refusal to sign the bill. And they interview some conductors. Some of our friends may recognize themselves. LaShawn Murray is one of my friends and a fellow conductor, is one of those they interview. But I'm going to put that up on the screen now.
For over a century, most New York City subway trains have run with a two-person crew, an engineer and a conductor. Advocates say operating as a pair is crucial to safety, but critics call it expensive and outdated. Tonight, the clock is now ticking for Governor Hochul to decide if it will be a one- or two-person crew that moves millions of people beneath the streets of New York. Eyewitness News reporter Lauren Glassberg has more on why all of this is turning into such a big deal right now.
Subway conductors are the transit workers who ride in the middle of the train and ensure passengers get on and off safely and assist during emergencies.
The train operator job is to move the train. My job is to make sure the passage is okay.
LaShawn Murray considers herself a second set of eyes since the train operator at the front is focused on the track ahead. The New York State Legislature has approved a bill that would extend two-person train crews indefinitely. But an NYU think tank studied 400 train lines around the world and found only 6% use two-person crews and said they don't improve service. And the law would, quote, undermine the spirit of the billions of dollars committed to improved signalization and operations. The governor has yet to sign it.
I would say the governor to leave two people in the train. Makes sense, it's safe, and it's good for the public.
And riders we spoke with agree and even seek out the conductor's car.
Especially when it's late, when it's dark, when I'm alone. I like knowing that that person's there.
Having someone else that will check if, people are in or people are out. Now that split of a second on there, I believe that's it's very helpful to have them. Yeah, it gives us a sense of security.
There's just so many people to be afraid of on the train, and knowing that there's someone there to make sure everything's in check is really comforting.
The MTA operates very few trains with one person, and Murray, who's been a conductor for 19 years, thinks her job is vital.
You need a person to go to, you need a person to talk to if you have a problem or a situation, you need a person. Like a computer couldn't do this, and the train operator could only do but one thing, so the conductor is definitely needed.
The governor's office says Governor Hochul will review the legislation. She is running for re-election and may approve the legislation because she wants the support of transit workers. In Brooklyn Heights, Lauren Glassberg, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Okay, let me pause this here.
Continue to follow that.
What's that? Okay. Let's go back here. Okay. So obviously, this NYU think tank is pinch hitting for the Manhattan Institute, the New York Post, Nicole Jelinek, and the rest of the scumbags and mouthpieces of the billionaire real estate parasite ruling class of the state that constantly trots out these narratives about it being a massive expense and why all these other subway systems dispensed with this long ago. Why are we still doing this? And obviously, none of those people who work for that mouthpiece of the ruling class ever provided any customer service in their life, never were responsible for the safety of fellow New Yorkers, don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And speaking of not knowing what the fuck they're talking about, or an ability to communicate a message, real militancy, we see our local 100 president, John Giarello, who, I got to say, I was so inspired by the fire-breathing defense of working-class jobs that came from this lump of shit, who is only president of the union because the last president was a sexual predator who was literally beating union staffers, female union staffers, and harassing them and abusing them.
Which Chiarello knew about.
Yes.
Right. And ran with him anyway. Right. So he's complicit.
And he voted for a $500,000 golden parachute for Richie Davis. Deep State Yuri says that institute doesn't have anything to say about air quality. Yeah, of course they don't. Because they want more people. Because they want more people to, give up on the idea that that our health and safety is a concern. They just want to eliminate our health and safety by pushing us completely out of our jobs. You know, they don't care about the riders either, clearly, because the riders just told you why it was important.
Any woman who rides the train overnight will tell you they don't feel safe in a car without operating personnel in it.
Yeah.
And also I'll say, I've said this a million times to people. I'll say it again. I can't observe the fucking platform as a train operator. I can't move the train. Not just the fact that I have to watch the road in front of me. I can't stick my head out backwards and watch the train, to make sure nobody's being dragged or jumped on the side of the train, because there's no room to do that. You take the conductors, if you were to expand opto, you would see a rise in fatalities because platform observation is vital to that. I've seen, people think, oh, well, now that they have, conductors are, we started doing that thing where they have to point at the board and they have to stick their heads out the window. But and the doors have sensors, but you can still be dragged. It can close on your coat and take you with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, you're going, it's a stupid idea to try to expand opto. I know some people are thinking that this bill would take conductors off the train, and it's not what it's doing, but it would guarantee that there's that we put 2 on it on all the trains.
Right. If she signs it, it's a positive, right?
Yes.
That will lock in 2-person train operation. If she doesn't sign it, then things stay the status quo. But it's obviously a positive that she signs it. I'm a train operator. I was a conductor for a year back in 06 in the IRT, 06, 07. And, Ray's argument is one key argument, which is that you can't observe the platform. And that's dangerous. If a conductor puts their head in and doesn't observe the platform, they can get fired because the TA knows how unsafe that is. So what people are saying, this dumb institute at NYU is saying, we want to make things so unsafe that when a conductor does that, right? They get fired, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is anyone who has been on the platform during rush hour, can you imagine 600 feet looking all the way down a train and look for New Yorkers? The thing about so I used to be a scientist. Look at the language that NYU study uses, right? They compare it to other systems, right? So what are the differences that make New York unique with respect to aggressiveness of passengers, with respect to infrastructure where the stations are curved or they have other things that make it so that you can't see clearly, right? And just the culture of holding doors and so forth. Nothing is like New York,
Absolutely.
right? Especially in the IRT, if you did this, the trains just wouldn't fucking move during rush hour.
In rush hour,
the conductors can barely get them closed.
Boulevard, absolutely. You can't close. I'm on the 7. We're 11 cars. You cannot close 11 cars at once.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, then
So
John, just I'm sorry. Something that the chat brings up is that Chiarola didn't even mention the safety issue of who the fuck is going to evacuate the train.
I will point out,
not
you
having
can't
two people.
necessarily criticize. I'll give Chiarola maybe more credit than he's due. You can't criticize him for what he doesn't say in there because you don't know how much he said to them. There's no way that's the entirety of the interview. They didn't walk in. They may have cut out. It's possible that they may have cut out more stronger arguments that said, and even again at the end, they even said she may only do it because she's looking for political favors from us.
But Ray,
which implies that it's what's that?
Ray, you do have to acknowledge that we have met the man. Okay?
Yes,
and we know
it wouldn't be it's not like it's a hard thing for him to say, point out, and goes back to safety again. You can't evacuate a train with 2 people because not everyone will be able to evacuate the train, and someone has to stay with the passengers who can't or won't leave because you can't abandon people on a train.
But my point to you though is that you see how Mamdani repeats the same slogans over and over again so that everybody knows what he stands for. Everybody knows what he's going to fight for. Everybody knows that when they vote for him, this is what they can expect to happen. Our union leadership and no union leadership has demonstrated an ability to stay on message. And I believe me, if he brought it up repeatedly again and again and again, the unsafe situation that will be put in if you ever have to evacuate that train, they would have reported on it. And they're reporting on, they're being given a free hand to cherry pick statements because he is not advocating for us in the way that he needs to be.
Yeah, they haven't said anything about this. I haven't seen any statements they've put out themselves.
Right.
They haven't tried to. Yeah.
But the other question is, where has the campaign been to win this? All it's been is lobby day. That's it. Not to mention the fact, don't you think you would be in a better position to win the passage of this by endorsing Mamdani and taking the Mamdani movement and the army of supporters that he can mobilize up to Albany to tell Hochul in no uncertain terms, sign this or you're dead.
And have they said to her, this is a red line. If you don't sign this, we are not backing you in the primary.
Yeah.
Because if Delgado has any intelligence, he would say, this is absolutely a necessity. We need 2 people on a train.
Yeah, absolutely. South Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just saying, I was just thinking that, Hochul is in a very difficult position now with Mamdani winning and the momentum behind his type of pro-worker, democratic socialist agenda against sort of Hochul's corporate, Democrat thing. And so the thing that may help push it is his victory, and Hochul recognizing the writing on the wall, saying that if she doesn't do something to, energize the union base, to energize the New York base, that she might lose. So, our union hasn't done anything. So, there's a chance that Mamdani's victory she may be feeling the heat because of that.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing too is that, like, the fact that our unions are so passive is what allowed people like Kathy Hochul to be in positions of power in the first place, and allows her to be immune from the kind of public pressure that she would have been forced to deal with all these years. We could have been putting the kind of pressure that Mamdani's been putting on her and other corporate Democrats decades ago. We could have been doing it by our own power, and we haven't done it. And that's how these creatures of corruption have been able to stay in power for this long. So, we have to think about that. How did we get here? And how the fuck are we going to survive with toothless, uncharismatic, corrupt leaders like we have? Transit workers really got to start thinking about, how does change happen? Is it them? Are they going to speak for you, or are you going to speak for you? So in any case, I think we need to wrap up. As you can tell, Chewbacca is upset. Chewie is very upset.
Oh,
he wants Daddy to shut up. So in any case, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and we're going to be trying to do this on a regular basis, probably every week or two, and as often as possible. But we look forward to your comments, and we look forward to having a two-way discussion. So please reach out to us, and let's talk about these issues further. Thank everybody for your time, and sorry to my coalition members that has spent nearly an hour and 3/4 when it was only supposed to be a little over an hour. But we had a lot to cover.
Yeah, we did. We covered a lot. So
yeah,
I think we did well.
Okay.
All right.
So
night, everyone.
All right. Good night.
Bye. Have a good night.